The fog had barely lifted from Falcon Ridge Training Base when the morning sirens echoed across the sprawling compound. Dew clung to the grass, boots pounded the earth in perfect rhythm, and the metallic clank of rifles being drawn from racks filled the crisp air. The base was alive long before sunrise, the kind of place where legends were drilled into existence and weakness was crushed beneath the weight of discipline. Among the moving bodies, voices, and commands stood Lieutenant Ava Hale, silent as a shadow, unnoticed like the breeze slipping between buildings. She walked with a calm that could make storms hesitate, her posture relaxed, almost humble, yet every motion she made carried a precision that hinted at something far deeper than rank or uniform. Most of the recruits thought she was just another mid-ranking instructor, someone who taught regulations, marksmanship, or basic combat drills. Her name never appeared in briefings. Her service file was a skeleton of generic assignments, her medals reduced to the bare minimum allowed to avoid suspicion. Her past missions were sealed behind electronic walls even generals couldn't open without clearance. Only a handful of people in the entire U.S. military knew the truth. Ava Hale wasn't just a soldier. She wasn't just an officer. She was GHOST-7, a Navy SEAL whose presence haunted the darkest corners of classified operations. A woman who had once vanished behind enemy lines for 4 days only to reappear with the mission complete, survivors rescued, and the enemy commander silently captured without a single gunshot fired. The Pentagon had hundreds of elite soldiers, but only one GHOST-7. But none of the recruits jogging past her that morning understood who she truly was. They saw only a small, quiet woman with the kind of stillness they mistook for weakness. Trained eyes would have recognized lethal efficiency in her stride, but recruits fresh from civilian life rarely recognized true danger. Ava moved along the training grounds, watching over the obstacle course. Recruits stumbled over walls, crawled under barbed wire, misjudged jumps, and forgot the rhythm of their breath. Their sergeants barked and cursed, correcting the shape of their stances with practiced ruthlessness. She said nothing, because she didn't need to. Her presence was enough. Even when ignored, Ava absorbed every detail, every flaw, every flicker of hesitation in each soldier. It was automatic, instinctive, the reflex of someone who had spent years reading battlefields the same way others read newspapers. But 3 recruits in particular had their eyes on her that morning, though not in admiration. Burke, Dawson, Finch. The trio had something to prove, or at least that's what they believed. They were loud, overconfident, and too aggressive for their own good, the kind who believed stature was power, and silence meant fear. They had noticed her small frame, her quiet demeanor, and the fact that she almost never raised her voice. In the minds of insecure rookies, this made her an easy target. Rumors spread quickly among recruits, and whispers claimed that Ava had been assigned to the base because she lacked combat experience. Others said she was an administrative transfer. A few insisted she had frozen during a deployment and was demoted into training staff. Ava heard the rumors. She simply didn't care. Let them think whatever they needed to. The truth had never needed defending. Burke spat in the dirt as Ava walked past, shaking his head. Look at that. She walks like she's scared of her own shadow. Dawson chuckled. Bet she couldn't fight her way out of a paper bag. Finch smirked, arms crossed. I heard she flunked close combat assessments. We should ask her for a private demonstration. The 3 men laughed, feeding each other's arrogance. Ava didn't even turn her head. She kept walking, her boots whispering against the ground rather than stomping. Some soldiers carried violence like a raging fire, easy to see. Ava carried hers like a dying star, silent, controlled, and unimaginably dense. By noon, the sun blazed high over the base, heat rising in shimmering waves across the pavement. Training had shifted to weapons maintenance and tactical drills. The armory buzzed with activity, recruits stripping rifles, cleaning chambers, and checking optics with varying degrees of confidence. Ava stood near the rear entrance, inspecting a weapon quietly. She moved like she was conducting a meditation, fingers gliding over metal with flawless efficiency. She never glanced up as the trio, Burke, Dawson, and Finch, watched her from across the room. Burke nudged Dawson. Let's see what the quiet mouse is made of. Finch grinned, cracking his knuckles. About time someone humbled her. They followed her as she stepped outside into the narrow corridor behind the armory, where the hum of activity softened into the steady buzz of generators. The space was seldom occupied, perfect for a confrontation. Ava paused at the sound of 3 sets of boots closing in behind her. Still, she did not turn. Burke stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "Ma'am," he said sarcastically, "you sure you belong here?" Dawson leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. "We just want to know which congressman's nephew got you your position." Finch cracked his neck. "Or maybe you're here because it was the only place they could put you without putting you in danger." Ava looked at them, the first sign of acknowledgement. Her gaze was steady, unshaken. "Step aside," Burke smirked. "Or what?" Her voice didn't rise, but it sharpened subtly. "Or you'll find out." Finch laughed. "Lady, we're trying to help you. You're not built for combat. You're—" Ava interrupted gently. "Remember who I am." The recruits glanced at each other. They thought she was bluffing. They thought she was trying to sound intimidating. They were disastrously wrong. Burke lunged first, broad shoulders barreling forward. Ava stepped half a foot backward, barely a motion, and launched a palm strike straight into his sternum. The sound was like a heavy book slamming shut. Burke stumbled back, crashing against the wall, breath exploding from his lungs. Dawson reacted out of instinct, grabbing for her arm. Ava rotated her wrist, ducked under his elbow, hooked a hand behind his knee, and flipped him in a single motion. His back hit the ground with a thud that echoed off the concrete. Finch raised his fists. "You." Before he could finish, Ava swept his legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard, staring up in shock. All 3 were down. It had taken 45 seconds. Ava looked at them, her posture relaxed again, almost serene. "If you understood who I was," she said softly, "you would never have picked this fight." She stepped past them, boots silent, leaving 3 stunned recruits wondering how a woman they thought was weak had dismantled them without breaking a sweat. But her story was only beginning. 3 months passed. Tension rose across the region. The recruits who once mocked Ava found themselves deployed into a joint training exercise that spiraled into a real battlefield emergency. What began as simulated fire became chaos when an enemy cell intercepted their location and ambushed them in a canyon, trapping them beneath jagged cliffs with no escape and no air support. Burke pressed against a boulder, shouting into his radio, "We're pinned down. We need extraction." Bullets ricocheted off stone. Dust clouds rose with each impact. The platoon was on the verge of collapse. Dawson yelled, "No air units in the sector. We're sitting ducks." A voice crackled through the radio, cold and unmistakably calm. "EAGLE-7 inbound. Hold position." Burke froze. "No way. That's..." The ground trembled as an A-10 Thunderbolt roared through the sky, wings slicing the air like a blade. It dipped low, engines thundering as the iconic growl of the GAU-8 Gatling gun filled the canyon. A perfect line of fire carved through enemy positions. The canyon lit up as hostile units scattered, overwhelmed by the precision of the strike. Ava's voice returned through the comms, clipped and controlled. "Move now. I'll cover your exit." The recruits moved without hesitation this time. When they finally reached safety, breathless, shaking, and alive, Burke looked at Dawson and Finch. "That wasn't just a pilot," he said quietly. Finch nodded. "That was her." They remembered the warning they had ignored. "Remember who I am." And they understood it now. She was a SEAL, a sniper, a pilot, a ghost, a legend. She was everything they were trained to become but weren't yet ready to understand. And her story was far from over. The base was quieter the night the platoon returned, as if even the wind understood that something had shifted. Soldiers who had once swaggered through the halls now moved with a quieter respect, shaken by the ambush and humbled by the miracle that had saved them. Word had spread fast. Someone flew an A-10 into a canyon deemed unflyable, executed a precision run that defied textbook flight paths, and single-handedly turned a slaughter into a retreat. Some called her reckless, others called her brilliant, but the few who knew the truth called her by something else. GHOST-7. Burke, Dawson, and Finch walked across the darkened hallway toward the barracks, their uniforms torn, dust still clinging to their hair. They weren't laughing. They weren't smirking. They weren't saying anything at all. Their silence carried the weight of realization, an understanding that had taken them far too long to earn. Ava Hale was not the kind of soldier you underestimated without paying a price. They reached their room and sat on their bunks, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead. Burke rubbed his hands over his face, the guilt obvious. "We messed up," he muttered. Finch didn't argue. "We got saved by the same person we cornered like idiots." Dawson leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "She knew we weren't ready. That's why she didn't report us." Burke lowered his voice. "She could have ended our careers. Hell, she could have ended us. But she didn't." That was the part that bothered them the most. She chose restraint. She chose control. She chose to teach them a lesson without breaking them. True strength didn't look like shouting or posturing. True strength looked like Ava Hale. The recruits didn't fully understand her nature until the following morning, when the base was summoned for an emergency briefing at the command center. The entire brigade gathered in the vast hall. Over 200 soldiers lined up, boots planted, backs straight, sweat still drying from early drills. The commanding officer, Colonel Reeves, marched in with a grim expression, carrying a file thicker than most mission dossiers. He placed it heavily on the podium. "Yesterday's ambush," he began, "was not random. Intelligence confirms the enemy cell responsible has been planning a larger coordinated attack on our forward operating base. They were testing our response time." A ripple of tension spread through the room. Reeves continued, "We need a rapid interdiction team. Small, surgical, successful candidates must have extreme risk tolerance and adaptability under pressure." Every soldier stood taller, eager to be chosen, except Ava, who simply watched with that same unreadable calm. Reeves scanned the crowd. "I already have one team member selected." Whispers broke out immediately. Soldiers shifted, exchanging glances. Everyone wanted to know who had been handpicked for such a mission. Reeves stepped aside. A door at the rear of the hall opened. Ava Hale walked in, not in her instructor uniform, but in full combat gear. Not the standard fatigues worn by typical units, but the matte black loadout of Special Operations Command. The room fell into dead silence. Recruits who had trained beside her suddenly understood the depth of their ignorance. Burke's jaw slackened. Dawson stiffened. Finch swallowed hard. Even seasoned soldiers straightened as if royalty had entered the room. Ava's presence was different now. No longer hidden, no longer subtle. The way she moved, the way she carried her equipment, the way her eyes scanned the room, everything screamed elite. Her very steps sounded like the thrum of a distant, controlled storm. Colonel Reeves spoke again, voice carrying newfound weight. "Lieutenant Hale will be leading the interdiction operation." Someone whispered too loudly, "She's leading it." Reeves heard. He smiled dryly. "She's not just leading it. She designed the plan." Ava remained silent. She didn't need to explain herself. Her reputation, finally unveiled, spoke for her. Reeves turned to her. "Lieutenant, would you like to brief them on the mission?" Ava shook her head once. "They don't need the details. Only the ones chosen will be briefed. The rest should be training, not distracted." Reeves nodded, accepting her decision without question. Ava stepped forward, addressing the hall, her voice steady and calm but with an edge that cut through the tension. "You all saw what happened yesterday. Many of you fought hard. Some of you panicked. Some of you froze. But survival is not always about strength. It's about clarity." Her gaze swept over the room. "While the canyon was collapsing around you, every decision mattered. Every breath mattered. Every second mattered." Her eyes landed on Burke, Dawson, and Finch. None of them dared look away. "When I said remember who I am," Ava continued, "it wasn't a warning. It was a reminder that the battlefield doesn't care about your pride. It doesn't care about your confidence. It doesn't care how loud you are or how strong you look. The battlefield respects only one thing." She paused. "Competence." The word echoed, and the ability to stay calm when everyone else is drowning in fear. Crushing silence overtook the hall. Not fear, respect. Deep, resonant, earned respect. Reeves called out, "Those selected for the interdiction team will be notified by 1800 hours." Ava turned to leave but paused at the doorway, glancing back at the recruits who had once cornered her. It was not mockery. It was not vengeance. It was something unexpected. Acknowledgement. An invitation to grow. The hall was dismissed, and soldiers dispersed with a mix of awe and confusion. Burke, Dawson, and Finch remained frozen in place until long after the others had left. They didn't speak as they exited the hall. Words seemed meaningless after watching someone they once dismissed stand before an entire brigade with more presence than a general. By late afternoon, the roster for the interdiction team was posted on the board outside the Operations Command Center. A crowd formed around it immediately, murmurs rising as names were read. Burke scanned the list. His heart stopped. His name was on it. So was Dawson's. So was Finch's. Burke's hands trembled slightly. She chose us. Finch exhaled. She shouldn't have after what we did. Dawson nodded slowly. She's giving us a chance. No, Finch said quietly. She's giving us responsibility. Before they could say anything else, Ava approached from behind. They turned instantly, standing straighter than they had ever stood. Ava looked at them. Her gaze held neither pity nor judgment, only expectation. The three of you are coming with me, she said calmly. Burke swallowed. Ma'am, why? Because you need the battlefield to humble you, she replied. And because I've seen enough instructors break recruits. I'd rather shape them. Finch lowered his eyes. We don't deserve this chance. Ava replied without hesitation. Then earn it. She walked past them, heading to the briefing room. They followed her like shadows, their earlier arrogance dissolved into something new, purpose. Inside the darkened briefing chamber, a holographic projection flickered to life, displaying topographical maps of a mountain region marked with red heat signatures. Ava stood at the center, pointing at enemy encampments. This is not a simulation, she said. This is a real enemy cell with real weapons, and they are planning an attack that could cost American lives. We're going to stop them. Before they move, the recruits listened intently. You will not panic, she continued. You will not disobey orders. You will not think you know more than you do. She glanced at the trio. And you will not underestimate anyone on this team, including yourselves, because combat has a way of revealing the truth of who you are. A silence heavier than armor filled the room. Then Ava leaned forward, voice steady as a heartbeat. Prepare for insertion. We leave at 0200 hours. Burke inhaled slowly. Are we going into enemy territory, with just you? Ava looked him in the eyes. No, she said. Her expression shifted. Something colder, deeper, more dangerous. You're going into enemy territory with Ghost -7. For more amazing stories, subscribe to the channel American Story Hub. Don't forget to like the video, leave a comment, and hit the bell icon for updates.